Think you want to publish a children's book series? Our guest today is going to share how she got started. This is the Journey to KidLit podcast, episode number 9. Welcome to the Journey to KidLit podcast. I'm your host, Brooke Van Sickle, and each week on the show, we'll discuss what it takes to write, publish, and market your kids' book. Let's get started. This episode is brought to you by the Ultimate Writing Binder, the #1 resource all children's book writers need to go from idea to finished kids' book. To learn more, visit journeytokidlit.com/ultimate writing binder. Hey there, and welcome to the Journey to KidLit podcast. I'm your host, Brooke Van Sickle, and on today's show, we have a really special guest with us. Katie Pye with the Fairytale Fraud series is here. Hi, Katie. How are you?
Great to be here.
I'm so excited you're here. So let's just dive into it. So you have this new series. It's called Fairytale Fraud, and it just came out in February. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
I love twisting things up, and I wrote the Fairytale Fraud series after thinking, wouldn't it be crazy if the 3 little pigs trusted the big bad wolf again? And I used that to teach children a message about wise trust. And after doing that one, I just got hooked, really. I've written 12 fairytale frauds now, just twisting up the stories and using them to teach different messages. And so that's how it began, really, just with the 3 little pigs and the wolf strikes again.
I love it. So was that the first book you published?
No, actually it wasn't. The first one I've published is Ready for Rescue, which is a spin on Rapunzel. I've just recently released that in February, and this one is Rapunzel just ditches any hygiene habits. And the witch has to try and solve this problem of being responsible for Rapunzel, but not knowing how to parent through this. Really fun twist in the end of the story. And spoiler alert, she does solve the problem.
Good. That's important. You have to have the protagonist solve the problem in a kid's book. Yeah, we talk about that all the time on the podcast and on the blog. So I noticed each of your books has a lesson. So how do you manage to weave the message into your story while still making it an entertaining story for children?
That's a really good question, because my children are really good test cases on all of my books. If they can sense at all that this is more about message than about fun, they will pull it up. And so my stories are all about the characters in these fairy tales and making them really relatable, finding something in them. And every story needs to have a character's journey, finding something in their journey that is relatable with our lives and journeying them through it. For example, in Trip Trap Trouble, the big billy goat Gruff sees that the grass is greener on the other side of the ravine, and he becomes discontented with what he has because he wants the best. Now, that's something that we all face in life. So it's his journey through that, and children get to see him journeying through it, as opposed to me preaching to them that they should have certain perspectives in life.
Yes, I love that. That's super important. So it looks like you have a lot of books expected this year. You said you had 12, and I think 4 are already out. So have you written all of them and then you decided to publish them? Or are you writing and trying to launch books at the same time?
I've written all of them, but I have to say, when you leave a book for a month and you come back to it, you want to tweak it. You really do. You look at it and think, oh, I can do better than that. So I've got 8 that are completely illustrated, and they're ready for the designer. But I go through and just do final tweaks of the words to make sure that I'm providing the very best, fast-paced, fun story before it goes through to the designer. So I'd say each of them is about 90% there.
Yeah, it's true. As an author and like creatives, we just want to make sure it's perfect. And if you have that opportunity to make an edit, you're just so tempted to just do it. So all of yours have been indie published. So you did them all yourself?
Yeah, and there was a really good reason for that. My fairytale frauds are first and foremost about having fun with the kids. I want to create a fun connection between the parents and the kids, but it's also for busy parents who may want to have conversations with their kids about important topics and just don't find the time to do that. And so I want to progressively provide a whole range of topics that parents can just sort of pick up the fairy tale fraud. And I've had kids saying, okay, Mum, when can I have the next one? So it's then driven by the kid wanting to find out about what happens in these stories, but it provides a really good lead into a conversation for the parents. I didn't want to risk going traditional published, partly because how long it takes, and I don't want to give that much of my life to the process, but also because I didn't want them to select some books and not others. The whole point is this series. The whole point is to provide this tool to busy parents.
I love that. That's so true, because it doesn't matter where they're published. You just want to make sure that it's the best story for your vision. And so that's really important. So as the person who's in charge and having to find all this, how do you find like your illustrators and get your books produced?
Great question. I have memories of spending hours and hours trawling through Fiverr and Upwork while my kids were sleeping and we're on holiday in Estonia. It does take a long time to find a match, and I have had a few false starts with illustrators. I've had times where illustrators have contracted to work for me, and I've contracted page by page, and then other things have come up in their lives and they haven't continued with the contract. And I've had work that I've contracted for that I've been disappointed in and really want to get re-illustrated. So it is a hard part of the journey, and the thing that I would really strongly suggest is that don't compromise on the illustrations. Really don't. Even though it's really hard, just keep searching for that illustrator that is a match for your story, because I'm reading a lot of KidLit at the moment, and there are some incredible books out there, but unfortunately these people have underinvested in the illustrations, and my kids are the ones who will give the stars for the reviews that I write, and they come up time and time again. They say, I love the story, but the illustrations, I can't give it 5 stars.
Oh, yes. I had a similar experience because I have my own books that are coming out, and I had to part ways with an illustrator because it makes your story when you have specific illustrations that aren't either matching with like the voice of your story, or they're just like not up to the quality of writing or whatever. Or if it's just like you have 2 different people with 2 different visions and they're just not aligning, So it's a really hard decision to have to make. So I get that. So how long do you give before you came out with your books? Did you wait only a couple months, or did you do like more of a year?
Before I
before you came out with one in February.
Right. Okay. So I've actually been living an expat life for the last few years, and because it's been really difficult to engage in paid work overseas when you don't know the language, it has just given me a lot of time to write. So I've basically been reasonably full-time producing these books and collecting them. Now, I probably should have launched some already, but it just felt too difficult to do from overseas. So it was a choice to just keep on creating, because my concept is the series, not each individual book, to keep on creating. So I had a series, something more than just a couple of books to offer parents. And so, yeah, it's taken a while.
Yeah. No, I think it's smart to have all of those pretty much up front, because now you can really focus on the marketing and getting your books out there. Now that you have like a really good schedule, because your website's awesome with all of the different tiles to let people know. So if they do like your books, they know when more are coming. And if you haven't prepared that far ahead, they wouldn't know that. So that's really good. Are there any specific marketing tips that have been helpful in getting your stories out there? Or how has the launch been going?
Launching in the middle of a pandemic is not recommended. Yeah, that has been a challenge because first and foremost, I'm always about people, and I realise that people are really stretched at the moment. So the normal connections and networks that I would use to launch a book, I'm not going to put any more pressure on those households at the moment. But I had to deliver to some pre-orders that I had set. So the launch process is very organic. Every day I sort of weigh up and look, and on balance, there's more positive happening than the challenge. If I looked at the raw numbers, I could feel really disappointed, but this is a journey. Anybody choosing to self-publish needs to steal their expectations and just recognize that this is a long journey, and many of the authors that are doing very well have been at it for a year or two. The thing is, you get to keep your backlist. You get to keep those, and they get to stay on the market for as long as you want them to. So taking the pressure off, I think, is really helpful. That said, I would say the most important thing would be to have a launch team. And I'm realizing that now. I suddenly threw out Sibling Wars last minute in the middle of lockdown happening in New Zealand because it was due on pre-order, and it's just been floundering. Even though it's a really important topic for now, it's about children fighting, Hansel and Gretel getting into fights and it leading them into a difficult situation. But I'm now wanting to launch Dressed in the Best, which is the Emperor's New Clothes. And that one, I've already got a team. I can immediately tell you it's going to go more effectively.
Yeah, but just because you couldn't launch as well as you wanted with the Sibling Wars, it doesn't mean that you still can't sell it, because you have all that time after a book comes out. You never stop selling.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And it's about expectations. This whole self-publishing journey is about expectations and being kind to yourself with your expectations. If you've got a good product and you're willing to put the time into understanding the marketing, you're well equipped.
Yes, I think that's really wise advice for anyone listening that wants to self-publish their books. So what has been one major thing that you've learned while creating your books?
I think the value of really good illustrations has been one major thing. I think that I also want to ensure that I write things that I would love to read. And so having that as my criteria, it does mean that I can overwork things. So those would be the three things. It would be the partnership with a really good illustrator, writing things that you love, that you would really love to read to your kids, that you want to read to them again and again, and then ensuring that you don't overinvest your time, because I can spend hours on one stanza. I just have to get it right. And sometimes people might not even notice. So weighing up that time against other priorities in life, like hanging out with the kids or having hobbies, etc.
Yeah. No, I think that that's smart. Well, and you still want to create a good product, though, and so it's important to want to focus. But yes, knowing when to stop is always key, because as creatives, we could literally keep going and always find something to change. So knowing when it's good. Yes. So what has been the biggest obstacle of doing your publishing journey? Probably the situation of the world or anything else?
Actually, I'm a technophobe. I don't like trying to navigate my way around new technology. I feel really empowered when I have, but just understanding all the different tools there are out there around the launch process. So the writing is glorious for me. I mean, writing is relaxed time. Some people might pick up a Sudoku. I pick up a stanza and I work in and I'm chuckling away to myself. That is the glorious time for me. But unfortunately, it's not just about the writing, and trying to navigate my way around how to optimize keywords and categories and how to list things on Amazon and get them down to the file size where I'm not paying most of my dividends off and sending the file across to people, and mostly sort of how to work out the marketing and the advertising. So, yeah.
Yes. Well, and that's a huge learning curve, because anybody who works in any sort of technology, I mean, even like in Journey to KidLit's case, we have the blogs and there's so many applications and you can't learn them all in the first month. So it's like every month you'll get better, and every day if you just focus on one thing. So if you just, like you did with your Amazon ads, if you just focus for a little bit, then you can take on and do another one, and you can figure out SEO and all the things, because you'll never stop learning in technology. So I think that's another place to give yourself some grace too, as an entrepreneurial and a writer.
Yeah. When I was writing my my Cinderella story, and I hate coming up with names, so this one does not have a name yet. It's Cinderella's dream in the meantime. In my retake of Cinderella, she actually doesn't get rescued by her fairy godmother. In fact, her fairy godmother doesn't turn up. And so she, with the help of an extra character that I won't reveal, she has to forge her own dreams. And to me, every time I've come across obstacles in this journey, this has been shouting at me. It's like, remember your Cinderella story. And when I've been going through really tough times, my children have been incredibly annoyingly sometimes reminding me of Trip, Trap, Trouble and just finding things to be grateful for. So it's really helped in the journey to have these books that speak these messages back to me. And it's just made me push through.
Yes, I love that. See, your books aren't just for kids, they're for everybody.
That's true. I wrote them for families. Like, the material in the back is not just for kids, but it's really healthy messages for anybody reading them. And there's been times where I've, we've just had heaps of change in our life. We've come back from living in Germany and resettled here, and then there's lockdown. And breaking news, my Humpty Dumpty book is about coping with change. And seriously, the number of times I've gone to the back and read the little tips from King Dumpty about things to help me through change and just sort of refresh my thinking there. It's just, yeah.
Yes.
It's helpful.
I think we all could read that book right now. Yeah. So if somebody wanted to come up with their own children's book series and publish it themselves, what would be your best advice you would give them?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'm not sure I would have done the series in a whole big go like this if I was back in New Zealand. The launching it all in one go is really challenging. The part of the writing journey that I love is actually the writing, and there's very little time for writing at the moment. So I would suggest that they tune out number one, see how it goes, and use that as a basis and a feedback to go on to number two. And there's nothing better than showing your books to kids. So sharing them far and wide when they're in draft is just brilliant, because these are the people who are going to be your audience. So these are the people that can tell you what they want, essentially. So that's what I would recommend.
Yes, I love that. That's so great. So if someone wants to learn about you or buy your awesome books, where should they go?
Thank you for the compliment. Head Start Thinking is the name of my website, and that's where it's got the range of books that are coming out over the next year. I'm also on Facebook. I'm starting on Instagram. This is what I mean about learning new technologies. And of course, I'm on Amazon and other booksellers as well. So, yeah, come and visit me on Head Start Thinking. I've got a fraud squad where I send updates of books as they're coming out and competitions and that kind of thing.
Love it. And don't worry, we'll have the links to everything in the show notes too. So if you want to get those, you can download the show notes so you can learn more about Katie and her awesome Fairytale Fraud series. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was so great having you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks again to Katie Pye for sharing her writing journey with us. If you'd like to learn more about Katie or the Fairytale Fraud series, visit the podcast tab at journeytokidlit.com under episode 9. And that about does it for today's episode of the Journey to KidLit podcast. Thanks again for joining me today. If you have a thought about today's episode or a suggestion for future ones, send me an email or reach out via Twitter. And if you liked what you heard, be sure to leave a review, and while you're there, subscribe to be notified of new episodes. Until next time, happy writing!